I'm Travis Wayne Goodsell. This is an updated version of the video I did back in July 2017. Since that time, I've learned more stuff that has happened that needs to be factored in, and I want to assist in providing that information for you. Please be kind to me. The air unit, nothing I can do about that. It's going to cause problems with the audio. And remember, you're Mormon. Be nice. Alright, so let's go to the Doctrine and Covenants, section 39, verse 23. And again it came to pass that on as many as ye shall baptize with water, ye shall lay your hands, and they shall receive the gift of the Holy Ghost, and shall be looking forth for the signs of my coming, and shall know me. Behold, I come quickly. So it's not just enough to know of the signs that are coming in the latter days, as we are the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It's also designed as a type and shadow of events on earth. Oops, I jumped ahead. And also how we are to know the Christ. All things typify the Christ. And so, as a type and shadow of things on the earth, you'd need to go to Joseph Smith's translation. That's in the back of your Old Testament, unless you have a computer program like myself. Then you have to go to study aids rather than scriptures. And Revelation chapter 12. Joseph Smith turns wonder into sign. So, and there appeared a great sign in heaven. And then he adds this prepositional phrase. Excuse me. In the likeness of things on the earth. The signs not only typify Christ, but they also point out things on the earth. Now, this is important to understand when you're trying to know the Christ. The Christ is a Greek word. It means the anointed one. In Hebrew, the Jews refer to this as the Messiah. There is not just one Christ, not just one Messiah. If you remember, when you go through the temple, you have your initiatories. In the washings, you are made a high priest and a high priestess. Then you go to the anointings. You are made a Christ and a Christa, the female version. Kings and queens. That's all a Christ is a king and a queen. And so all kings on earth are considered Christ. And so we as Latter-day Saints are given our washings and anointings to become hereafter kings and queens, priests and priestesses unto the Most High God, hereafter to rule and reign in the house of Israel forever. Remember that line? And so hold that thought. I don't think it's necessary to change too much for you. right here at the beginning. All right. So, how do we know when signs are going to happen? For example, you know of several places that talk about the sun shall be darkened. How do we know which sun darkening is the sun darkening spoken of for the latter days? Now, in hindsight, I know more now than I did in 2017, because we now have a knowledge that helps us confirm. And in fact, for the sun darkening, we now know where on the earth, because X marks the spot. Let me show you a picture of what I'm referring to here. Alright, see how exciting this is? This is one of the ways in which they made it easy for us to know when the sun would be darkened. It's because they made an X marks the spot, or identified the X marks on the spot, because this is the way the earth is designed and set up, and mankind does not have the technology to make earths and place the stars in the heavens. That's a little bit out of our range. But they have, and we have, the technology to identify these signs and when they are to occur. So notice the one on 21st of August 2017 that has already happened. So we now confirm that the prophecy of that one has been fulfilled. And this is astronomy. Astronomy allows us to identify upcoming stellar events. And I get my information from stellarium.org using that program. There are other programs I'm aware of, but I found this one, I've been using it, it's working for me. I'm able to see the past, the current, and the future. Wikipedia also has a list of solar eclipses. And you can go back, see the past, and see what's coming up in the future. And so astronomy is a hard science. You can use math, a physics calculus, to also confirm the times, the days, and the hours of certain events that are to occur in the heavens. But notice the path of the 21st of August 2017. Not only does it cross over the whole United States, it crosses over Independence, Missouri, and Andaman-Diamond, Missouri. Kind of cool, huh? There are some other things that help us in the identification of this sign. On the 21st of August 2017, whose birthday was it? If you don't know, it was President Monson's birthday. So that's kind of interesting. Another thing that we as Mormons have an extra special understanding that nobody else in the world does is that right in the very beginning of the Book of Mormon, it says, I, Nephi, write in the learning of the Jews and the language of the Egyptians. The brass plates that they make sure to get when they're leaving Jerusalem, which was the promised land, and then they go to a new Jerusalem, a new promised land, they take the brass plates with them. The brass plates are also in Egyptian. And from the Egyptian records, they knew about 600 years from the time Lehi left Jerusalem. This is important to understand. Lehi himself, in that first chapter, right after saying language of the Egyptians, has a dream in which he sees a sign that is common in Old Testament. In Isaiah, Matthew, but you have to combine the two places in Matthew together, because Matthew makes some mistakes. And then Revelations. And not only that, but the Book of Mormon adds an extra element to that sign of those other three prophets. And so when you understand that Egyptian is involved, you also need to know some Egyptian. On the 21st of August 2017, for example, the ancient Egyptians had a religious calendar, which is not a 365-day-a-year calendar. They had a civil calendar for that. Instead, the religious calendar was 360 days. And then occasionally added extra days, or a month actually, for the religious calendar to keep it somewhat normalized. And so the new year falls on different days of our calendar every single year. And as a result, that year, on the 21st of August 2017, was their new year. And so when you understand astronomy, you understand the timing of the rotations and the movements through each of the constellations and their conjunctions with each other, and you understand the rarity of certain events. And so for that day to have a total solar eclipse to start the latter days of the sun darkening, X marks the spot, the Egyptians knew that and designed their religious calendar based upon this, because they are the ones from where the prophecies of the sun shall be darkened, moon turned to blood, stars fall from heaven. And I'll show you their understanding of the eyes of Horus, which the two eyes in Egyptian is called Peter, which is the word for seer. The Egyptians had a story, and when they tell a story, you need to pay careful attention, because it's a prophecy and it can be translated on multiple levels. I won't get into that in this video. But notice in the picture that they're both eclipses. The right eye represents government. The left eye represents religion. These are the eyes of Horus. And in the story, at the beginning of the battle to restore the kingdom of his father Osiris, who had been murdered by his brother Set, his eyes are plucked out, wounded. And they are eventually restored along with the kingdom. He wins the contest. And so to have a total solar eclipse in the first year of the reign of a president on the United States, where X marks the spot, or will mark X marks the spot, that's kind of eye-opening. Pay attention, because we're in it. And so that's why the Egyptians knew and set up their New Year's in that manner, because they knew way back when, and they knew where on earth. There's a lot of other historical information to connect with this, but this video is going to be long enough for you already. And so this is where we got the prophecies of the sun shall be darkened, moon turned to blood, because they referred to the Egyptian story prophecy of the battle between Horus and Set to restore the kingdom. Now notice that the crossing solar eclipse is on 8 April 2024. So close to when the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was officially understood to be organized, on the 6th of April. And so, as I mentioned, America has a government. We also have a religion that's involved. And this is where it can get uncomfortable for us as Mormons, because as much as it is cool that things tie to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, it's not what we've been born and raised to expect. I've had to come to this reality myself, and I have a knowledge and understanding of foresight, or hindsight. And so when, for example, there was a tetrad in 2014, 2015, that's where you have a cycle of 4 total lunar eclipses in a row, and they occurred on the Jewish holidays of Passover during the April time, and tabernacles in the September, October time. Different each year, because they use a lunar calendar as well. And so the dates are different every year. And during the 3rd, which occurred Saturday morning of April General Conference, to the 4th, we lost 3 apostles. Perry was the first, Packer was the second, and Packer is the president of the quorum at that time, and thus Nelson was elevated to that position. And then Scott, right before the end of it. He barely made it in. And so, yes, there were lots of us who thought, is this a sign of the latter days? We don't know. The church came out and said no. This is where it gets uncomfortable for us as Mormons, because we were born and raised singing the praises of the church. I'm trying to think of the primary song wording. I belong to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I know who I am. I know God's plan. And we sing praise to the man. It's referring to Joseph Smith. We thank thee, O God, for a prophet, because we believe we are the true successors of Joseph Smith. Though we were sort of not informed about Emma Smith not going with Brigham Young, and Sidney Rigdon not going with Brigham Young, and David Whitmer, Oliver Cowdery. What happened to them? William Smith, brother, didn't go with Brigham Young. And so, why then is Brigham the successor? I'm not going into that for this video. We're only talking about the signs in the heavens. But you need to understand, in order to understand the Latter-day Signs. That's why I'm warning you in advance before we get into them. Just to prepare yourself, because to find out, it will go against what you've been born and raised to believe in. And there's the tendency in human nature to automatically jump up and deny and rebuke and condemn. But these are the signs. These are hard science, the meaning of which is the uncomfortable part for us as Mormons, because there's a government factor involved and a religious factor involved. And if you hadn't guessed by now, the darkening of the sun means collapse and destruction for the government, and thus the other eye, the moon darkening, refers to the religion. And so these three different apostles I'll have to revise the picture for you, because I don't want to shock you too much after I've already shocked you enough. So let me put that picture up with the tetrad. Death is symbolized by a falling star. In our Mormon doctrine, we have both spiritual death and physical death. Spiritual death is related to the rebellion in heaven of Lucifer and those who followed him to have a plan of salvation that only had the highest degree of the celestial kingdom for everyone, and that was accomplished by taking away agency. Heavenly Father's plan is section 76 of our Doctrine and Covenants, that goes over the 3 kingdoms of glory, and that was designed for us to choose for ourselves how we wanted to live our lives. If we wanted to have a one man and one woman to live with for the rest of our lives, yes, one man, one woman, I said. Like I said, there's things in history in church history that we need to understand. I'm not going over it in this video. And we want to have a family for the rest of our life, then we can choose that. There are conditions. You can't go contrary to that. You can't go out and find yourself somebody else to have a family with, for example. And then there are the 2 other kingdoms of glory. And we don't take away agency from people. We just say, hey, there are these 3 kingdoms. These are the conditions for each. And we're supposed to let people choose. And the only reason for baptism is for the highest degree of the celestial kingdom. If people don't want to have a spouse for eternity having children, then there's no need for them to be baptized in the church. But the concept of death, whether spiritual, as is mentioned in Isaiah, how art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer? Lucifer is the Latin word for Venus. And Venus is out in the sky right now. It is the morning star because it can't excel and exalt itself to become the noonday sun. The noonday sun beats it out and overshadows it, and its glory far surpasses Venus. This was the ancient Egyptian battle between Horus and Set, as Set, which is where adversary comes from in Hebrew, which is Satan, and Horus is the star Sirius. It's also, it's a little too bright, you probably can't see it now, but the 5 o'clock hour, it's starting to show up. Just as Jupiter has now set, Jupiter is set, Sirius is now rising, and it's rising in conjunction with Venus, as they're both battling to become the sun, which in Hebrew is the Star of David, the sun symbol. In Mormonism, it's our sunstone, the rising sun. In Egyptians, it's Khepri. Depending on which country your Egyptologists are from, they have different pronunciations using different vowels for the consonants. And the sun at noonday, as Mormons, I'll inform you, that's Amen. And if you Amen. And Jesus Christ is referred to twice in our Doctrine and Covenants as Son, Amen. That's the rising sun, the one who's supposed to be the restorer of the kingdom on earth. The Egyptians understood it as pharaonic succession. You have Pharaoh, who himself is born as son Amen, as Amen comes to the queen, conceives and gives birth to the successor to the throne of Egypt. And when the Pharaoh dies or is soon to die, he passes the throne on to the son, who is anointed to that end, becoming the Christ. And that's the concept, and that's the term, and he becomes son Amen, taking the throne, winning the battle against corruption and evil and chaos and disorder. And that's important to understand, because let me show you a close-up view of the sign on the 21st of August 2017. Okay, as you can see, the total solar eclipse on the 21st of August occurred in the constellation of Leo, which is understood as the symbol of Judah, phonetically the same as Utah, coincidentally. Or is it? But a symbol for Jews or somebody else, if not Jews in Jerusalem, as we now know that this is X marks the spot in America. Just a heads up, because I'm not going over the history and will not be going over scriptures in the sense outside of the signs. The Doctrine and Covenants has been known to have been encoded before 1981, when the church service missionaries working on the footnoting with the Topical Guide and Bible Dictionary tried to decode as many of the words they could understand belong to actual people and actual places. However, they've missed some, and I'll give you a hint. Doctrine and Covenants, section 1, verse 16. It's not Babylon. They missed one, at least. Doctrine and Covenants 45 also misses some. Now, this is because, as Mormons, we've been born and raised to think as we think. And so be nice to me. You're Mormon. I'm Mormon. But that doesn't mean that wickedness can prevail. Wickedness never was happiness. And I'll leave it at that. And so, you have to understand that even though the prophecies take place in Egypt, in Canaan, Israel, in the Roman period, during the Babylonian conquest period, during the Egyptian period, wherever, whatever, that doesn't mean that the prophecy has to be in those specific lands. Matthew makes this mistake. As he says, "Out of Egypt I have called my son." And so he writes the story about his Christ to try to conform with the prophecy. Well, Egypt isn't Egypt, because the sign for the latter days is over America. And so it's out of America I have called my son. But they're using Egypt as the original prophecy. And Matthew, the author of Matthew, is trying to harmonize his version of events with the prophetic events, and he messes up both. I won't go into further details on that. But just so that you understand, when you read in your Doctrine and Covenants or Book of Mormon, just because they say certain people, certain places, you need to understand it in the context and interpretation of America, because that's where it's all happening. That's X marks the spot. And as you can see, the total solar eclipse is in conjunction with Regis, this king star. Technically Regus in the Latin. But notice there is Mercury on the lower end and Mars on the upper end. You may not be able to see it unless you're looking at a big screen like I am on my computer. If you're just using your phone, get a computer if you can. I guess your phones can allow you to zoom in. Maybe. Try that. Because what you also can't see, because it's very small print, is that the location had to have been in the path of the total solar eclipse. If I were to have West Valley City, Utah, it would have shown a partial. I couldn't get it to show the total solar eclipse that you see there with the shining light around it. And so not only is the date of its event of symbolic significance and prophetic significance, also the location in space from as seen on Earth. is also symbolic and significant. The ancients purposely called the constellations what they called them, called the planets what they called them, so that they can tell stories of the movements of the planets through the constellations. And thus Horus, the story of the battle, is also to be translated as a prophecy for the astronomical dating of these last days. Alrighty, so with the three lunar eclipses, or the 4 lunar eclipses with the 3 apostles dying, the question is, was that also part and parcel of this? When you understand the sign of the Son of Man, yes, that's how amazing it was to have the 3 prophets die and thus get replaced. Leo is designated by only 9 stars. It has quadrillion stars. Just to be clear, quadrillion stars. They knew it, we know it, but they designated this constellation with just 9 stars for Leo. And so there's a sign in the heaven that Isaiah, Matthew has to be combined, and then John's Revelation chapter 12 and the Book of Mormon, all 4 witnesses refer to this. In the Book of Mormon, it's referred to 12 stars. Stars are symbolic of the 12 apostles. And so, since Leo only has 9, when it talks about 12 apostles, or 12 stars, 3 stars have to be added to the constellation. Now, there was a sign on the night when Joseph Smith was going to receive the plates. And I'll show you that one, and then I'll show you the one from the Isaiah, the combo Matthew, John's Revelation, and the Book of Mormon. As Joseph claims he was going to the Hill Cumorah every year from after 1823 to 1827, when he obtained, as he says, the plates. He was there the same time each and every single year. And that's important to understand. You'll notice that the sign in the year 2000 or 1827 was very close. It's just that only one planet, I believe, is on her crown. The others are on her shoulders. And so the only one that fits was the one that occurred on the 23rd of September 2017. Now, what happened on that day, Mormons, especially Mormon women? The women's session of General Conference was the first ever. Previous to that time, the women's session was considered a special extra conference just for women, not included with General Conference. But that year, in 2017, Monson joined it with General Conference. And in April, a brand new Relief Society president was called so that the meeting for the first ever women's session of General Conference was by the new Relief Society president, who had been, now pay attention, the primary president over children, Relief Society president over women. What's the difference between a woman who hasn't had a child and a woman who has had a child? Well, in scriptures, the one who hasn't had a child is called a virgin. The one who has had a child is called a woman. That's the difference. And so the primary president over children becomes the Relief Society president. And her first meeting is on the 23rd of September 2017 as part of General Conference. And that sign appeared on that Saturday. And Joseph knew this because, going back to Joseph Smith's translation or revision of Revelation chapter 12, not only does he say in the likeness of things on the earth, he also moves verse 5 about the birth of the child up to verse 3, talking about the sign, and places it before the sign of the dragon and the sign of the stars falling from the tail of the dragon. Joseph Smith knew. He knew the date. He knew it would be middle of September, middle of October, because that's when the sun is in Virgo. He knew that it would be where the moon is at her feet. It would be when Jupiter is retrograding within her womb for a pregnancy period of time, as Jupiter is the planet that retrogrades in each constellation for a pregnancy period. And thus, with 12 constellations, he retrogrades in each 12 constellations as he goes around the zodiac. And so every year it can't happen. Every 12 years it can happen. And so the more you throw into a sign in the heavens, the more precise it is. Now notice I included Ophiuchus, who battles the serpent, which has Saturn over by his knee. Saturn is the father of Jupiter. Ophiuchus is understood anciently as the throne of God. Now go back to your Book of Mormon, first chapter, Lehi's dream. I saw God sitting upon his throne. I saw one like the sun. I saw 12 stars following. You see how the Book of Mormon adds to the sign of Isaiah, combo Matthew, and Revelation 12. Revelation 12 was specific enough. It had more than enough to give us a precise day and hour. This is the sign of the Son of Man that Matthew messes up on. And it's not understood as his birth because the battle already began. He's come back to Egypt. Horus has come back to Egypt, and is already begun the battle. And 23rd September, the month after, right after the Jewish New Year in the Jewish calendar, it begins. And it's been beginning. Okay, so let's go to, because of the length, I'll just tell you. December 17th, 2017 was the sign of the dragon. That's where all the players in the sign were gathered at the tail end of Serpens that Ophiuchus is battling, and that's the 5th dark day of Hanukkah, the Festival of Lights. And so that was an education for me that year, learning that there was a dark day in the Festival of Lights for the Jews. But sure enough, following Joseph Smith, saying that the birth comes first, then the dragon sign, then now let's get to the stars falling from the tail of the dragon. And hold on, Mormons. Again, I remind you to be nice to me. I'm Mormon too. I couldn't edit out the keystone of the arch of the doors of the Salt Lake Temple on this picture for you. When I found this out, yes, my heart sunk. It was in researching church history that I learned that this was the symbol that Brigham Young had adopted. And I know the background, I know where it originated from, I know why. The Book of Mormon tells us why, and history tells us why. And I'm not here to do that video for you. But yes, as physical death is also a falling, as Monson, even though he's in the position of the sun, he's a falling star upon his death. And the night of his death was the quadranted meteor showers that happen every year. But not every year has a death of the president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It was also a supermoon on his death. The first and second were the supermoon. And that 31st was the super blood blue wolf total lunar eclipse. I had already made connections with lunar eclipses and the deaths of LDS prophets back with James E. Faust, and then followed with Gordon B. Hinckley in 2007, 2008. I was not prepared for what the signs in the heavens of the latter days was going to teach me. Nonetheless, that's the way it is. Notice Mars, in the second of those three pictures, is at the top of the scales of judgment. Scales of judgment comes from the Egyptian of Ma'at. She's in charge of the scales of judgment in the temples, where a person affirms that they have not committed adultery, they have not murdered, they have not stolen, etc. 42 affirmations, which the Bible condensed down to 10 negative commandments. No Sabbath day observance listed for the Egyptians. Why? Because every day was a religious day. Every day the temple was open. Every day you can worship God. The Babylonians were the ones who began a 7-day week calendar system, with the number 7 being their superstitious day, so that the 7th day of the week was a day of rest. No labor was to be performed, because that's the superstitious day. We don't want to jinx ourselves, so that's why they did that. And thus, the Jews, having been taken captive into Babylon, likewise adopted it. And so when the Bible was written after the captivity and the return, they got assimilated into the Babylonian culture, took their language. Hebrew now becomes Semitic. Jews now become Semitic. The calendar system, the practices, all Babylonian. They're Hamido. Jews are Hamido. Daniel tried to let Jews know this, but oh well. So yes, on the night that Monson dies, the revelation of the stars falling from the tail of the dragon is fulfilled, as it occurs every year, but this year with the death of the president of the church. Mars is at the top of the scales of judgment, which in Egyptian is Ma'at, who takes over immediately upon the death of the president of the church, the president of the Quorum of the 12. And the president of the Quorum of the 12 was Nelson, because of the death of Packer, and I believe even Perry. Wasn't Perry before Nelson as well? And Scott. Weren't all three of them before Nelson? I'm not going to waste time looking to verify. But Nelson was the one to replace Monson. And there you have, on the night of his death, you have Mars at the top of the scales of judgment. And if I didn't tell you directly, and if you didn't catch on indirectly, the 3 apostles that were replaced became part of the sign of the Son of Man. In Leo, they got added. Mars is also one of those. So even though a 3rd apostle was added in, Nelson took over as the president, already being among the 12. So as you can see, the planets represent different people at different times in history. So you can't just say Nelson was back in the time of Joseph Smith. It doesn't work that way. You might not even be able to say, well, it was Brigham Young. Might not work that way. Have not done the research to check. Again, these are the latter days. These are what everybody's talking about. So if signs occurred for the Smiths and Brigham Young and those guys, I haven't bothered to check. Been too busy with the current signs, because this is where our namesake comes into play here. After this sign, we had a comet during the Super Bowl, as they highlighted the Super Bowl with a comet crashing to the Earth. There was also the Age of Aquarius. If you remember that song by Fifth Dimension, it says the dawning of the age of Aquarius. So yeah, the 7th house, Mars and Jupiter, I think. You have to go back over the song to, but yeah, that same year, same thing. And so I'm not going to go into all the signs, but yeah, there's lots of other signs that have occurred in conjunction with the main biblical signs. The sign of the Son of Man is a precise date, just as X marks the spot for the signs. I need to show you the 3 days of darkness sign, because the days of darkness, not nights of darkness, so it's not lunar eclipses, it's solar eclipses. But also, once you've identified celestial bodies with persons on Earth in the location of America, then you can follow them. And so I'll put the 3 days of darkness at the end of this video, because I'm ending it here. 3 days to remind myself. At the beginning of the video, I read to you from Doctrine and Covenants, section 39, that you look for the signs so that you can know the Christ when he comes. I've already gone over, his sign has occurred. It's in the likeness of things on the earth. He's here. If you do not understand that our son Ammon is a Mormon who is to be a man like Moses, who is to be the one mighty and strong, then you've not been reading section 103, verse 16, or section 85, verse 7, because verse 8 is the current president of the church. And we've got signs going on this week. And if you followed Mars, if you followed Jupiter, if you followed Mercury, because I'll give you a clue, he's Trump, who was put on the throne of America in the reign, in the first year of in his first year as president, the sign of the Son of Man came. Go back to your Book of Mormon, the first chapter. In the first year of the reign of King Zedekiah, who was a puppet king, put on the throne of Jerusalem by Babylon. And in that first year, Lehi sees the sign of the Son of Man, with the addition of Saturn and Ophiuchus, God sitting upon his throne. And what happens? He has an exodus. He takes his family, because the Jews, his own religious organization, wants him dead. That's why it's so delicate with these videos. Trying to be a Samuel the Lamanite who talked about signs coming, of whom the Jesus in the Book of Mormon comes to Nephi, who also has Exoduses in the beginning of the book, has a different Nephi, saying, where's the record of Samuel the Lamanite? I told you, I am Mormon. You are Mormon. Be nice. Because the prophecies say you are not going to be nice. And I have evidence you have not been nice. I am hoping that this tone, because I'm typically like Joseph Smith, Jesus Christ, Elijah in my tone. Elijah with the priests of Baal, Jesus in Matthew 23, Joseph Smith in the King Follett Discourse. And that may be a little harsh for people to handle. As you may have guessed, I'm an LDS critic because of what I've learned about my own church. Contend against no church but the church of the devil. And so we are looking for a Mormon to be the man like Moses, to replace the current leadership of the church, to restore not only Joseph's organization, but the ancient organization of the Egyptians, not the Gospels. So keep in mind that to know the Christ, you need to know the signs. The signs are in the likeness of things on the earth. There were stories written about the signs. They are all symbolic. So Noah is a sign. He's a type and shadow. He's a prophecy of this Mormon. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, Samson, Jonah, Elijah, Jesus, all are symbolic of who we're looking for, who we're waiting for. Now go to Doctrine and Covenants section 45, where it's encoded. It's not the Jews who say, what are these wounds in your hands and feet? Referring to Zechariah, which he doesn't say feet, just hands. That's why it's so tough to communicate with Mormons, as a Mormon even. So another thing, the 8 April 2024, it goes over the farm of the Smiths and Kirtland, Ohio, crossing in southern Illinois. And to understand southern Illinois, you need to know about the Knights Templar, of whom the Smiths were of the York Rites Masonry, which has the Knights Templar in it. And then you can understand the Book of Mormon, that it too was encoded. And then you can understand the rocks in a hat. You can understand the holiness to the Lord parchment. You can understand the Jupiter stone, etc. And just as a clue in church history, the keystone for church history is Canandaigua, New York. Joseph Smith Sr., Captain William Morgan, anti-Mason, and Heber C. Kimball. All three of those tied together in Canandaigua, New York. Look them up on Wikipedia. Like I said, I'm not going to go over it here. This is about signs. You will understand that one of those men are not like the other. One of those men just do not belong. One of them just outright lied and did not reveal that he knew. And then when you understand that, then it horrifies you about why he chose to join the church. And why he took Hiram's wife and kid to the Salt Lake Valley after their assassination. As you begin to understand who it was who actually murdered them, Joseph and Hiram. And the Nauvoo Temple, which shows symbolically who murdered them. Joseph and Hiram are the sunstones. Like I said, I'm Mormon too. It was heartbreaking. But it was all necessary for the signs of the latter days. One more addition before I end this video. As the stories are symbolic, I've been trying to help people understand Moses confronting Pharaoh. As the 3 days of darkness are mentioned as part of the plagues, but what got Pharaoh to relent and let Moses lead the people as the new Pharaoh, the new Melchizedek, the office of Moses, of which Moses came on Passover to the Kirtland Temple with Elijah and others, and gave him the keys of the office of Moses, which are the real, actual keys of the kingdom, not the keys of preaching the gospel of the kingdom as missionaries. The coronavirus. That's the creeping death that Metallica calls it. That's what causes the death of the firstborn of Egypt. And for Pharaoh, it was a theocracy, which means that the firstborn birthright blessing son takes over leadership. As we now know, it's America. It's now. We have a coronavirus, but we do not have a theocracy. And so the manner in which it will be fulfilled is not the deaths of the firstborns per se, as both Trump and Nelson have firstborns. It is also symbolic of succession to the throne. So for government, the succession to president means no more elections, but then it also means no more Congress, no more cabinet, because there's a chain of succession if the president is unable to fulfill his duties and is removed. If you've seen Battlestar Galactica, either version, the second one, the reboot, specifically goes over it as the Secretary of Education becomes the president. For the church, there's already a line of succession in the apostles. And so Oaks first, and then Ballard, and on down the chain. And then there's also the 70, because of the manner in which Brigham Young set it up, the 70 also can succeed if there's no more apostles, if there's no more first presidency, the office of Moses. And so if God is going to fulfill the prophecies, how is it going to be done? I'm concerned it's this week. I hope not, but the prophecies are here. We're in the coronavirus phase, and we're being murdered. They call it herd immunity. We're being treated as cattle. We're all being infected purposely. I don't know if that's a symptom of it. I also have allergies that cause this same symptom. I don't have any other symptoms for coronavirus. But again, this is all new. We have 1,000 kids, after having started school, who are now quarantined. And those numbers have not been put into our Utah stats. They're purposely manipulating, holding back the numbers, holding back the testing here in Utah, not just the rest of the United States. We need freedom, and our government's not doing it. And Nelson is not following Moses, his example, not following Joseph of Egypt, not following his example with the storehouses. So, deliver us.